For me, the Japanese developer Treasure has always had a certain mystique to them. They've always been the developers of games I've wanted to play but haven't been able to, either due to insufficient funds, or because their games are on systems I didn't own, or because they weren't released in Australia at all. I had to glean what little I could about games like Gunstar Heroes, Radiant Silvergun, and Sin and Punishment from gaming magazines, or later from the miracle that was the internet. These games were a tantalising presence in my imagination, and I desperately wanted to play them. Alas, I never got the chance. I did eventually manage to acquire a not entirely legitimate copy of Ikaruga for the Dreamcast, and although I liked it a lot, I very quickly realised that it was too challenging for me to ever truly enjoy. In truth, despite the enduring hold that they had on my gaming psyche, I only ever properly played one Treasure game, their first, Gunstar Heroes, and that game alone was enough for me to still respect Treasure 26 years later. So now I'm going to play through it once again, for the first time in decades, to see if that respect is still well placed. The game starts very much as it means to go on. The Sega logo leaps and warps around the screen, then Treasure's own logo emerges from a purple 3D polygon. 3D in a Mega Drive game. Okay, it's 3D in only the crudest sense, but these two logos really do set the tone of the game, and that tone is energy and excitement. There's an opening cutscene and a bit of plot, and I assume there's a bunch of backstory to go along with this. Maybe it was in the manual. I don't remember too much of the story. There's Red and Blue, the two playable characters, there are bad guys, there's an epic betrayal, there are gems that the bad guys want, and it's very important that they don't have them for some reason. There's presumably more to it than that, but the story was never my main priority in this game. The title screen contains an interesting little quirk, one that I found oddly fascinating as a kid. You can use the controller to alter the spin of the main title block thing, and it's another remarkably smooth bit of animation. I was obsessed with the idea that if you could somehow start the game while the block was perfectly flat with the narrow end with Treasure written on it facing the screen, you'd unlock some kind of cheat mode. It never worked, but I could never quite give up the idea that if I got it pixel perfect, something incredible would happen. So, I'm going to try playing on hard mode. Like Echo 2, this game changes pretty significantly on different difficulty settings. There's one specific reason I have in mind for playing on hard, so we'll see how far I can get. I'm not promising anything, and I'm not even going to attempt expert mode. I have a pretty solid grasp on my limitations. The game presents you with a choice of which of the first 4 levels to do first. And there is actually some meaning to this choice. You get an increasing amount of starting health based on how many levels you've cleared, so it makes sense to save the hardest for last, when your health pool is highest. I don't remember that ever being a huge factor. I always just selected them in the order they were presented, so I'll stick with that for now. You also get to choose your movement mode, basically meaning do you want to be able to move and shoot at the same time, or be able to stand still and aim without needing to move. Both of these options have their appeal, but I've always favoured the more mobile option. And finally, you choose your starting weapon. There are 4 weapon types, and I choose the flame type because on the whole I find it the most fun, but more on that in a minute. In any case, I think this level is a great introduction to the gameplay. It's frenetic, it's chaotic, it's bombastic. There are many remarkable technical achievements in this game, but the sheer amount of moving things that can be packed onto the screen at one time may be the most important. Enemies come from all angles. They shoot, they jump, they slide, they throw bombs at you. Most importantly, they explode in gloriously satisfying fireballs. This is partially why I chose the flamethrower. The more fire, the better. Now, of all the elements for which Gunstar Heroes is fondly remembered, and there are many, it's probably the boss fights that are most significant. There are a lot of them. In fact, in some ways the entire game feels kind of like a boss rush mode, as the run and gun sections between bosses are often briefer than the boss fights themselves. And those fights are mostly creative, exciting and challenging. This first boss fight is none of those things. To be blunt, it's a giant immobile stalk of asparagus that drops pink spores and spawns the occasional caterpillar. Even on hard mode, it doesn't take more than a few seconds to kill. It does have the good grace to explode into a fountain of flame at least. Okay, time for a more comprehensive explanation of the weapon system. There are 4 main types: Force, Lightning, Seeker, and Flame. On their own, they're pretty simple. Force is a straightforward bullet-like projectile, Lightning shoots little beams of light, Seeker consists of green things that lock onto enemies, and Flame is, well, a flamethrower. But you'll almost never be using them on their own. You can have 2 types equipped at any one time, either different types or 2 of the same, and each combination results in a different weapon. Up to that first boss I've been using double flame, which gives me a longer, more damaging flamethrower than the single version, but now I've switched to a flame lightning combo. This creates a short, powerful laser beam that I've always thought of as a lightsaber. It's the most damaging weapon in the game, but also has the shortest range, which makes it an interesting challenge to use. It's also one of the only weapons that can destroy enemy projectiles, which gives it some real defensive utility if you wield it skillfully. As you can possibly tell, I do not tend to wield it skillfully. The second boss is a decent upgrade over the first, and honestly it's another impressive technical achievement. I know it's all done with sprite scaling or what have you, but this is about as close as you can get to a fully 3D character on the Mega Drive. Not too much time to take in the spectacle, however. The lightsaber chews through this guy's health rather quickly. Not quickly enough for me to come away from the fight with more than 2 health, however. Then it's down the other side of the pyramid, through the forest, very nearly dying because I pressed the wrong button to pick up the health for the 100th damn time, and to the first end of level boss. Objectively speaking, it's not too tough a fight, but I start with low health, and the lightsaber, while absolutely brilliant for destroying the many enemy projectiles, does require you to get in close. And yeah, that was inevitable. You've got infinite continues, so that's something. And most sections are brief enough that you won't be redoing too much stuff when you die. In this case, I still have to redo the previous boss, but that's not too much of a hindrance. I come back to the end of level boss with more health and the double flamethrower for extra range, but that possibly wasn't a sensible choice. The guy with the gun can really mess you up. He doesn't do much damage, but if you get hit by one projectile, there's a damn good chance you're going to get hit by a bunch more. I remember that getting under the boss can be a good tactical move, so I try that. I take a lot more damage and nearly die anyway, but the boss decides to lob grenades at me, which it just so happens the flamethrower can destroy, and I emerge victorious. Just. Now, on to the next level, and okay, I gotta pause it here. Remember when I said I was gonna just do the levels in the order presented rather than just do the easy ones first? Well, I tried that and it didn't quite work out as I'd hoped. So I'm gonna have to restart, diverge from the way I played the game as a kid, and go from the first level to what I always considered the 4th level. This one starts with a brief run through an industrial zone. I should point out that I swallowed my pride and switched to the Chaser as my starter weapon. Any combo that utilises the Chaser type feels a bit cheap as they diminish the importance of aiming and positioning, but there's one big downside too. Smart guns in this game tend to be kind of stupid and don't care too much about whether what they're aiming at is a dangerous enemy or a harmless bit of the scenery. This can be a problem when there are half a dozen murderous enemy soldiers closing in, but your weapon only wants to see how long it'll take to destroy a crate sitting innocently in the corner. You can usually refocus its attention just by taking your finger off the trigger for a moment, but in a game like this, a moment is often more than you have. Anyway, I spent a bit of time here with the Force Chaser, then switched to the Lightning Chaser, which is definitely the cheapest of the cheap weapons. It zooms around of its own volition, leaving you completely free to focus on defense and avoiding enemy attacks, which is great. It is, however, also the weapon that's most susceptible to making bad targeting decisions, and it's possible to spend several long moments wondering where it even is, before you realise it's pointlessly attacking something harmless off the screen. Now you get a board game of sorts. You roll the dice and move around the board, land on a fight square and you'll have to face a mini-boss or some small platforming challenge. There are too many bosses to go through individually. They're all pretty simple but occasionally quite creative. I like the tiny little guy who is a devastating bundle of violence and aggression. This fight gives a great example of how useless a chaser weapon can be when it doesn't want to focus on the actual enemies. And this thing is, well, it's a face that doesn't seem to do anything other than look at you in a kinda creepy way. Finally, you get to the end and it's time for the end of level boss. Wait, no it isn't, because you inevitably land on the square that sends you right back to the start. Fortunately, the mini-bosses you killed stay dead. When you do actually get to the final boss, it becomes apparent why it's often recommended to do this stage first, when you have the lowest health pool. Even on hard mode, all of the boss's attacks are incredibly easy to avoid. I managed to get hit by most of them because I am a colossal idiot, but even that doesn't matter because they do tiny amounts of damage. The boss gives up his gem, and... oh god damn it, that's embarrassing. Of course, now I remember all too well that he always does that, but I guess after 25 years he's made me look like a sucker once again. Bastard. Third stage now, and it's a short one. The first section is easier than it might look, so long as you keep moving. It is possible to fall off the bottom of the screen, but it's not usually an issue. And there's nothing particularly fancy on top of the airship, just a non-threatening mid-boss and a surprisingly generous amount of weapon and health pickups. There's a sort of warm-up boss fight before the main event against this M. Bison doppelganger who has an excellent evil laugh. He flies around a bit, but the lightning chaser has no problem sticking with him, making for an easy fight. The proper end of level boss fight is a bit of a different story. This guy has multiple powerful attacks, each of which can take away great chunks of health and potentially knock you off the plane. You really need to keep your distance, something which is made more difficult when the plane you're on goes halfway off the screen, greatly reducing the amount of space you have to work with. Things are made more difficult by the fact that the boss enters an invincibility state after taking only a little damage from your weapon, giving him an excellent opportunity to launch a counter-attack. It seems this fight might be intended to challenge your melee fighting skills. I haven't talked about these skills yet, but your character does have a surprisingly robust and effective range of attacks that don't require a weapon. You can do a ducking side attack, you can swing upwards when hanging below an enemy, you can do a sort of jumping lunge that actually does more damage than just about any weapon attack, and on easier difficulties at least can demolish some bosses in seconds. You also have a throw, which is very damaging but comes with significant risks. As you might have seen throughout the run so far, enemies also have the ability to throw, and the amount of damage it does far surpasses most projectile attacks. So if you close in with the aim of throwing your opponent, if you don't time it pretty damn well, you may find that the tables have been turned. If you get the timing right though, it can completely shut down many enemies, including some bosses. Anyway, this boss isn't super tough, although I make heavy work of it. His attacks are predictable and telegraphed well enough that they shouldn't hit you too often, unless you have the reflexes of a doddering old man like me. But even I managed to get through it without too much pain. Okay, now back to the second level, or the fourth level. Let's just call it the minecart level, because that's what it is. There's no actual platforming here, but your minecart is a versatile little thing. You can jump as usual, and you can also switch from the floor to the ceiling with a double tap of the jump button. With a bit of finesse, you can even sort of hover in the middle, which proves useful at times. Before long, you come across a train laden with bad guys, including the M. Bison wannabe, who earns his evil villain credentials by throwing his own lackeys at you. This little snippet of the game is an excellent example of what Treasure does best. They pack a lot of character into a small, simple package. I love the way the poor little guys bounce back and forth in panic as the train burns, and the way they chase after it or cling on for dear life. This is 16-bit charm at its most effective. Then it's on to the boss, Seven Force. This guy is the reason I wanted to play on hard mode, and it's also the reason I had to restart and come back with more health and a better, or at least cheaper, weapon. As the name might suggest, he has 7 forms, at least on hard mode or above. On medium and easy he only has 5 and 3 forms respectively, so fighting him on those modes would really be doing the game a disservice. He presents a bit of a challenge though, so this may take a while. The order of the different forms is essentially random, I think, except for this first one, which is always the same and is one of the most dangerous, at least until you get the pattern down. Even then, on hard mode he fires off his attacks quickly enough to cause problems. The Urchin form is very simple but highly aggressive, and its charge attack barely leaves you enough time to get out of the way. The Lion form is, well, pretty damn easy actually. Even I can get past this one without issues. Next up is Tails form, nothing to do with that adorable fox chap with the two tails, alas. This guy only has one tail and it's decidedly less fluffy. He also shoots a wide spread of projectiles from his mouth, which aren't super damaging but are tough to avoid. Crab form is next, and this one is both the most challenging and most fun. You have to time your jumps really well, and it can be satisfying to fall into the right rhythm, I imagine. Rhythm was never my forte. After that we have the Eagle form, not very challenging, at least not with this weapon. But remember at the start where I chose whether I wanted to be able to move while shooting or be locked in place when aiming? For the majority of the game the former option is better, but then there's the odd occasion like this. The boss is never in front of me, so if I needed to aim up or down, I would also move up or down, which in this case would make me run right into the boss's spiky wings and take damage, which can be a huge pain. Of course, now I'm using a chaser weapon, which obviates the need to think about such things. Did I just use the word obviate? Man, I'm pretentious. Finally, there's gun form, which is basically just a gun that shoots at you. It doesn't get much simpler. And that's Seven Force. Back in the day, this fight blew my tiny mind. A boss fight with 7 different stages? Amazing, unprecedented. It seemed truly epic. These days multi-stage boss fights are not quite as remarkable as they once were, and in retrospect Seven Force isn't so much one epic boss as it is 7 mini-bosses of varying quality. But even now I still think things that transform are cool. So that's the last of the selectable levels. From now on you don't have any choice where you go. Apparently the bad guys have broken into your base, kidnapped Yellow, i.e. the girl, and they want the gems. Gosh, what a cunning stratagem. What comes next is, well, it's a bit of a slog. It's a straightforward level in that you really just move straight to the right, but it's a long journey by Gunstar Heroes standards at least. And it's really rather difficult, filled with little bits that are bound to drain significant chunks of your health, especially if you don't have the optimal weapon. These crates, for instance, provide an apparently irresistible target for chaser weapons, while these mechs are kind of a nightmare if you don't have a chaser weapon. They're too tall to hit with most normal weapons even if you jump, and if you try to aim up at them they just walk right over you. It's a pain. The end of level boss is likewise a challenge. It's the Bison knockoff again. He starts off with a jetpack, and this stage isn't too bad. A chaser weapon allows you to do steady damage while avoiding his bombs and lunges. Once he lands, however, things get tougher. This is another fight where it's really best to focus on hand-to-hand combat. The boss is susceptible to throws, but man, you have to get the timing right, because if you're a millisecond slow, it's you who will be launched skyward. The worst thing about this level is the lack of checkpoints. Die here and it's back to the start. The main part of the level is such a battle of attrition that you're unlikely to start the boss fight with anything like a full health bar, and once you're there it takes only a couple of badly timed throws to send you back. This is where hard mode really starts to show its nasty side. Still, I managed it, eventually. Up next is a surprisingly competent side-scrolling shooter segment. It's obviously a rather dramatic shift in gameplay style, but it works well, and is a damn sight better than many dedicated side-scrolling shooters on the Mega Drive. It's got everything you'd want from a game like this, a variety of enemy spaceships, asteroids, turrets, rocket launchers, bombs, lasers. In fact, there are a lot of those things. Really, quite a lot. Really, rather too many. Okay, this is tough. Too tough. I've been slogging it out on this level for quite a while now, and I haven't even got close to the end. I could carry on until my sanity leaves me altogether, or I could just relent and accept that I'm going to have to finish this thing off on an easier setting. So here I am, easy mode. I considered medium, but I figured if I was going to sacrifice what little dignity I had left, I may as well go all the way with it. And this is awesome! The game is a totally different experience now. This is a power fantasy. I am the angel of exploding death, and woe betide all who get in my way. Yes, it's cheap. Yes, the challenge factor is now 0, but it's fun. I'm not saying easy mode is a better way to play Gunstar Heroes, but it is a valid one. Hard mode is great for those who want a challenge, and expert mode is probably even better. But this is the way the game has lived in my memory for the last couple of decades, as a maelstrom of chaos and violence, with me at the centre. To add a bit of variety, and now that weapon selection doesn't matter so much, I mess around with some of the other combinations. This is the double force combo, a rather pleasing torrent of orange death. This is the Force Lightning combo, which you can scatter around nicely. This is the Force Fire combo, easily the slowest of the weapons, but it explodes on impact, further damaging any enemies in its radius. Anyway, in very quick order I'm back to the Space Shooter stage, and boy howdy is it a lot easier. There's just a lot less stuff, and what there is isn't quite as deadly. It would be quite difficult to die at this point. What the... Well, that's embarrassing. Fortunately, I didn't have any dignity left. Okay, Seven Force is back, and he seems to be slightly cheesed off. Even on easy mode, he's aggressive as hell, but that's okay. That first death was just a result of my overconfidence, and the fact I wasn't using a super cheap weapon. I rectified both of these elements on my second attempt. Now we're on the enemy capital ship, and the game is basically one big boss rush from here on out. First off, it's this thing, which was another technical marvel of its time. Again, I know it's not proper 3D, but man, it looked like it at the time. And it's another multi-stage boss fight, all of which crumble almost immediately in the face of my easy mode might. I take no pride in this. Then all of the bosses from the first 4 levels get to take another swing at you, and they're actually not pushovers. I mean, they're not exactly a challenge, nothing on easy mode is, but they put up a fight at least. Especially Green, aka the 7 Force guy, he has a lot of tricks up his sleeve. Still, it's not as if he could kill me on easy mode. Well, I mean, he definitely couldn't kill me twice. Okay, but he definitely couldn't kill me 3 times. Oh, he didn't? Well, hooray for me. And then it's time for the ultimate big bad boss of Doom, who is immediately blasted into the ground by the gems. That was unexpected. Instead, it's time for the real ultimate big bad boss of Doom. You get a chance to pick up a different weapon combo, but not very damn much of a chance. I managed to pick up the health and then everything was gone. So now I have a suboptimal weapon and low health, and am I going to die yet again on easy mode? Yes, apparently I am. Fortunately, there's a checkpoint right before the boss, so that's okay. And now I have the luxury of picking whatever weapon combo I want. I revert to my old favourite, the lightsaber, and that turns out to be a pretty good choice. You don't actually need to attack the boss in this fight, instead you just need to damage the gems. And it turns out they take a metric crap ton of damage from the lightsaber, which is also pretty handy for destroying projectiles in this fight. It only takes a relatively small amount of lightsaber annihilation before the enemy's health counter reaches 0 and the game is won. Yes, on easy it's a bit of an anticlimax, but damn it, I felt like a destroyer of worlds during this easy mode playthrough, so it's kind of fitting that the last boss should crumble before me. There's a brief denouement where Green apologises for being controlled by the enemy and sacrifices himself to stop the thing, whatever the last boss actually is. I'm guessing it's an ancient alien robot death machine, which is nice of Green, I guess. I didn't even know he was being controlled. I thought he was just a bastard. And that's it. The credits roll, accompanied by an exciting piece of music. In fact, all the music in this game is damn good. It's not quite as iconic in my mind as that of Echo 2, but it's all high quality and it fits the action perfectly. So that's another game that I've reached through the fog of nostalgia to take a proper look at, and how does it hold up? Pretty damn well, all things considered. It has to be one of the best looking games on the Mega Drive, and the graphics have aged incredibly well. Sure, the many and varied technical tricks aren't as impressive as they once were, but the fundamental elements, the character design, the backgrounds, the colour palette, they're as appealing as ever. And the explosions are just as satisfying to me as a doddering old man as they were to me as a kid. Possibly that says more about me than the actual game, but I stand by my opinion. The gameplay too is as good as it gets on the Mega Drive. Everything's super responsive, fast-paced, simple enough to be instantly accessible, but with enough nuance that it won't wear thin even after many playthroughs. And it's worth playing through multiple times, for sure, to explore the possibilities of different weapon combos, and also to push yourself through the harder difficulty settings. Gunstar Heroes is an excellent example of how to do difficulty settings right. On hard, it's a definite challenge, but not an insurmountable one. On easy, the experience is completely different. It's honestly like a whole other game, and one that's just as fun for different reasons. I'm a doddering old man, whatever pride I may have taken in my gaming skills has withered and died along with my youth and my general sense of optimism, so challenge is not always a requirement for me in games. My playthrough on easy took almost exactly 1 hour, and that felt just right for a game of this sort. It's like an exciting, fast-paced and highly polished episode of a TV show. Something that's frenetic, but actually kind of relaxing too, as you don't have to think too much about it. And if you want something more challenging, that option's there as well. And there's just so much character and charm. It's there in the animations, in the wacky bosses, in the way enemies hurl themselves around the screen, and in the sound effects. This is the sort of thing that makes a game memorable, and it's a large part of why I've held a lot of nostalgia for Gunstar Heroes throughout the years. Well, thanks for watching. I think I've got a pretty good idea of what I'm going to look at next, and it'll be kind of a new experience for me. Until then, get off my lawn.